Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug Show. My name's Doug Cunnington, and I decided to record a little bonus episode before I go to the gym. Those of you watching over on the YouTube side, you see I have my workout clothes on, which is just a dry fit shirt. It's aqua in color, kind of just trying to visualize everything out there for the podcast listeners. This is a bonus episode, and the thing is, it's the middle of the summer right now. It's actually a very, very warm day outside. I think it's supposed to be about 100. And I'm taking a lot of time off over the summer. The recordings and the podcasts that have been coming out for the last, month, I've recorded these like way ahead of time. So I've worked pretty far ahead. And as many of you know, I used to publish 2 episodes per week for the Doug Show. Well, at least a couple people were sad that I canceled the second show, but it actually freed up a lot of time, and I've been doing some other stuff instead. Part of that is writing a book. I'm writing a book with my podcast co-host over on the Mile High 5 podcast. And I've been just kind of fucking around a little bit. I've been working out a little bit more and just trying to do some other things. So it's been good to free up that time. That said, I still have so many thoughts going on in my head. I get a lot of emails, and I looked at the mailbag and it was bursting at the seams metaphorically. The label in my Gmail account had just so many different emails that I just haven't covered yet. So this is going to be kind of a quick hitter episode. It's going to be a little shorter, not as much bullshit in this one as normal, but I'm going to go through 4 emails. Someone asked about, I think, age domains, and it's kind of timely because I just interviewed Alex Drew from Otis Global. So if you haven't checked out that interview, you should check it out. And then we have another one from, I won't mention last names, but a guy named Jeff. He's emailed me several times, and he was like, hey, I saw a success story. Maybe I need to do this because that person uses a specific technique, and I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit too. I'll read the email so you know what's going on. Someone mentions some details about zero volume search terms as well, and then how the industry has changed. So we have 4 emails. We're going to go through them. Like I said, it's going to be shorter, not as much bullshit. I got to go to the gym, but I just miss doing some of these mailbag episodes, and I know I could put it on the queue and just save a little more time, but let's see how this does. All right. Number 1, we have a tip. So I have a blog post out there about zero search volume keywords, probably a video. And someone shot me an email and they were like, hey, here's a couple tips if you want to validate. So this is Niche Nirvana replied back and said, hey, if you see a zero search volume keyword, then maybe go check on Reddit, forums, or Quora to see if there are any topic areas that use that keyword or at least have the same search intent. And that gives you a pretty good idea about whether or not people are interested. And I kind of remember, I think it was on a live stream with Kyle Claver, who's been on the show, and he's one of the mentors over at Otis Global. I think he even mentioned that he'll hop over to Reddit as one of his primary research methods. So next one is from ZZ, is their from name. So ZZ has emailed me a couple times. Often they sounded frustrated, right? So if I looked at the tone of the email, it seemed frustrated. So ZZ said this: I've emailed you a couple times about the state of link building and how my newer projects have not gone as well as the old ones. I doubt you want to do this because it doesn't really make sense for you to do, which is this is my commentary. It's a rough pitch, right? If you're already talking me out of it, then you're right. It's probably not a great one. So back to the email. I doubt you want to do this because it doesn't make sense for you to do it. But if you want to have a guest to talk about some of the current struggles with building websites in the state of Google SERPs, then I would love to come on and vent for a bit. Now, I'll just finish the email and come back. I built 5 sites pre-COVID, and 4 of the 5 did very well. The 5th did fine, but not anything to brag about. Since the start of COVID, I've launched 30 sites and have had 0 good results. I've listened to hundreds of episodes of your show, Niche Website Builders, Authority Hacker, Fat Stacks, and others like Matt Diggity and Income School. Pretty much dedicated my life to this for the past 6 or 7 years. Again, I know this isn't in your interest to do it, but if you are interested, let me know. So I am one of the shows that will cover a quote non-success story. Sometimes those are very interesting. We can learn a lot from people's mistakes and their struggles and so on. There's 2 things here. So one, you mentioned, I'd love to come on and vent for a bit. Well, nobody really wants to hear someone complain, right? And I read into the details there, but the specific way that you phrased it as a vent for a bit doesn't sound that great. The other portion is we like to have a success at the end. So the struggles along the way, super cool, right? People learn a lot from it. You're getting a lot out of it right now. You're learning a ton, even though it doesn't feel like it. And hopefully you come out on the other side with some learnings, right? So distill down all these lessons that you've learned as you were frustrated, as you were figuring things out, you were testing. Eventually you want to have like, here's the answer over here, so that there's like a good story arc. We don't always have that, but ideally that's what we want to have. I have interviewed a couple people, or at least on a blog post have talked about like, hey, here's some stuff that doesn't work out. Like, I want to hear from people that haven't reached success yet and what you're struggling with. And it's actually been kind of interesting, right? That some of those have worked out pretty well. Now, the takeaway from this, I'm reading between the lines, is kind of a short email. I think it's part of the industry, right? Or any business that you're working in, you may have to pivot. So what I see here is maybe you're trying to do the same thing that you were doing before, and you've given it a good shot. You've launched 30 sites and you haven't had any good results. One observation that I have here is you also mentioned that you've launched 30 sites since the start of COVID. So that'll be about 3 years. So you're launching 10 sites per year, which is kind of a lot. It's a little bit less than 1 per month. And I don't know the time frame that you built those 5 sites, but those were before COVID. So you built 4 to 5 sites in the previous, I would say, 3 years, based on, again, reading between the lines and doing a little math here. So you've launched way more than you did in the past, and maybe you're splitting your focus a little too much. So that's one observation. The other thing is you listen to all these different shows, and you've dedicated your life to it, as you mentioned, for several years. One issue with these shows, I stopped listening to other marketing podcasts. Number one, I don't want to accidentally take someone's idea because I listened to their show and I was like, oh, I just thought of it. I maybe should be a little bit more, a more avid listener of those shows, but I kind of got overloaded at some point. And I think a lot of people hit that point. So I should probably cherry pick and listen to a handful of episodes here and there. But what happened to me was I was hearing all these different ideas and techniques, and I was cherry picking them, and I was trying too many things. So you might be kind of scattered. Again, you started 30 sites in about 3 years. That's a lot. You potentially were trying so many different things that you were just scattered and you didn't have a strong focus. One thing that I've seen from people that have kind of the biggest success stories, they're usually laser focused on one site and they're completely obsessed. They kind of shut out a lot of the noise and they're only focusing on the one site and one thing and one technique. High quality is really the name of the game. Things are changing, right? So we have AI content and there's different ways to publish a huge amount of content. So things are changing, right? Which brings me to the point, and one thing that I learned in the past is you have to pivot, right? In 2013, when I got started, link building was done a certain way. It shifted quite a lot in the time frame of like 2 to 3 years. So we were using private blog networks and a lot of kind of shady link building techniques. And then Google was cracking down on that stuff. And eventually I shifted, right? So I completely changed the way I was doing things. I changed the way I was doing keyword research. I changed the way I was link building and tried the opposite of what I was doing before. And that actually worked pretty well. And you have to continue adapting. And you didn't write it here, but if you were doing the same things in pre-COVID timeframe and post-COVID timeframe, then it makes sense that it's not working as well because things are a little bit more competitive. It's a little bit tougher right now, or it's just different. It's not necessarily tougher. I think if someone got started right now and they were obsessed, they would find a way to make it work. So overall point here, don't spread yourself too thin. Look to pivot. If you're trying something and it's not working, you did it 30 times in a row and you're not getting any success where it was like 80% of your sites were doing pretty well. The fifth one was okay, but 84 out of 5 were doing pretty well. So anyway, you have to pivot and make sure that you're adapting. If you are doing that, ZZ, then, look at something else. There's another issue there, but there's some problem if you're doing 30, if you created 30 sites and none of them have good results, then there's some issue with your technique or overall framework that you're using and you need to change it up. Thanks for writing in. By the way, if you want to be featured on the show, feedback at Doug.Show. I'm behind right now, but I'm catching up. I'm doing what I can, and maybe I'll do another one of these bonus episodes too. All right. Next, we have a question from Thorsten. A question about episode 449 with Kyle Claver. He's come up twice already. Kind of a long email, but the general point was he loved that episode. So Thorsten loved the episode. And the main question is, isn't Kyle's approach of buying aged domains and linking to a money site considered a manipulative black hat strategy? I've done some research and he thinks that it's generally against Google's guidelines. So that was the premise of the question. He goes into more detail, but I reply back and I say a couple main things. Number one, I don't think it's black hat. Maybe some people would call it gray hat, but generally, here's the deal. Google doesn't want you to do anything to get rankings, not even a guest post. So if you go read the guidelines, which hopefully my memory serves me right, but basically Google doesn't want you to do anything to try to rank better, which sounds stupid, right? That's what SEO is as a whole industry. But they don't even want you to do a guest post, or maybe you land an interview in a newspaper. They don't want you to do that to improve your rankings. So it's kind of a mindset thing. And I mean, are you going to believe what Google writes in the guidelines there? So really, it's up to you. So you could read the guidelines, you could listen to what Google has to say, maybe not take everything they say at face value and read between the lines a little bit, but it's totally up to you. And if you don't want to do link building or anything like that, that is fine. So I also gave the example of what if I acquire another website, right? What if I go buy a website, one of my competitors out there related to niche sites, and then I redirect the old domain to mine, right? So I bought a business and I'm absorbing it. I'm acquiring a site. And my question is that black hat? I don't think so. I think that's just what businesses do. So what if Walmart, or let's say Google, buys another company? What if Google buys another company, which they do? They redirected that website to their own, right? It makes sense. Maybe it points to a page that talks about the acquisition and how the transition was done or whatever, right? Some business information. Companies buy other companies all the time. It's kind of a standard way that, capitalism works. So it's not really black hat if you look at real examples. Will Google be upset about it? I don't know. It makes sense to me that a company could buy another company and then they just point it to the new website, right? There's nothing weird about that. So it's up to you to make a decision on how you want to do things. But Thorsten, I would ask you, like, if you wanted to buy a website and then link it up and say, hey, we acquired it, it totally makes sense. There's no issue with that. In fact, that is the right thing to do if you do acquire a business. And some businesses, they just acquire a lot of different companies. So this could happen several times and it would not be an unusual thing. In fact, the biggest company in an industry will often, buy up its competitors. It's not really an unusual thing. Now, Thorsten gets into some of the details about like, hey, if I buy a domain, can I just like recreate all of the content and grab it from the web archive? And some people talk about that on various YouTube channels or podcasts or blogs or whatever. And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't copy anyone's work. I wouldn't copy their intellectual property in any way. By the way, I'm not a lawyer. This is all just entertainment and I tell stories. But generally, you shouldn't violate someone's copyrights. And if you go take their content without permission, whether it's from the web archive or elsewhere, that's probably not a good thing to do. And if you are taking someone's intellectual property, then they come after you, right? So I wouldn't advise that you do that. And, the internet is a shady place out there, especially in the make money online area. So there are, videos or blog posts that advise you to do things that are just clearly not legal from a copyright standpoint. So I would avoid those. So if it seems really shady, then it probably is. Now, that said, you did the right thing by asking some questions here. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let me pop over. I think we have one more email, and this is from Jeff. So I sent an email out last week, I believe, and it was all about Christy. So Christy is a student that I've worked with for a few years. She enrolled in my course back in 2018. We actually lived in the same town, Bozeman, Montana. I moved away. We still did video updates and interviews and all this stuff. I think I have over a dozen interviews. She's done really well. She's one of the people that just focused on the one site for a very long time, and it's paid off. She's earned, I think lifetime, she's earned over $300K from the site. It's worth several, few $100,000, probably mid six figures or so. And it has, diverse income sources from different affiliate programs, some Amazon, different affiliate programs, ad revenue. So it's in a great spot. She has an email list. She has some online courses, but it's mostly from ad revenue and affiliate revenue. So the question that Jeff asked here says, that's impressive. I'm still struggling to make profits. Seems like technically I know what to do, but I need to know how to generate traffic. Should I pick a different niche? It looks like Christy hires writers, so I wonder if I should hire writers as well. I work full time and sometimes I only have 2 hours per day to devote. And I can't remember how long Jeff has been working on his site, but it's been a pretty long time. I think at least a couple years. And my thought, I have a couple thoughts here. So one, I know that Jeff has read a lot of my emails, and I think he's watched a lot of videos. So I think technically that a lot of the knowledge is there. He even says, it seems like technically I know what to do, but I need to know how to generate traffic, which is the key piece, right? So I think it's a problem of execution in some area. Now I don't know exactly what it is. Usually there's a couple things that it comes down to. So is the keyword research solid? Is it a decent niche? And is the keyword research solid? And then the quality of the content. Usually those two things will get you some traffic, right? It may not be a huge site, but if you have good keyword research and the content is good enough, you should be able to get some traffic. And people often spend a lot of time consuming content. They're like experts, but they haven't done the execution enough. They haven't taken enough action. I think Jeff does have a site out there and he's taken some action, but this is where you have to take the feedback loop and figure out what to try differently. Again, pivoting. You have to be flexible to change your strategy a little bit. So one thing that is kind of an issue, right, is should I pick a different niche? Generally, like most niches are going to work out okay. Sometimes they're like a little too competitive and it's going to take a long time. I don't think Jeff's is a particularly like super competitive niche. It might not be searched for very often, but it's not super, super competitive. So I think it is probably okay. Most niches are okay. In fact, Christy's niche is one that I thought was pretty obscure. I thought, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not familiar with it. It's such a small industry, but it turned out to be very profitable. And there's a handful of, kind of big search terms, but mostly it's just a lot of long tail keywords out there. So that's one thing is like, if it's not working, you may need to pivot your strategy a little bit. I'm going to contradict myself like several times in this answer here, but should you pick a different niche? And before I was like, nah, maybe you just stick with it and you just need to figure out like where you're screwing up. I don't know where it is, but maybe you just stick with it. Like you've already spent, a year or two on this site and maybe you just need to tweak a couple things and then things will turn around. The other side of that, this is one of my contradictory answers here, is once you launch your first site, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Hopefully that'll be like the biggest set of mistakes that you make on a single site, and slowly you'll get better. You can correct some of those mistakes, but if you do start a new site, you'll realize all these things that you should have done a little bit differently, which you can do correctly from the get-go on the new site. Maybe you find something that is a little bit less competitive or has more keywords or that you're more interested in or that is not covered very well, or maybe it's kind of a new industry, right? AI, for example, AI for a specific application. So if you find something that you're interested in that you think has more potential, I could see it being okay to pivot and start a new site because the first one was just kind of a practice one and you got a lot of mistakes out of the way. So that's the little contradiction. The other part that you ask here, Jeff, is like, it looks like she's hiring writers. So Christy hired some writers. So I wonder if I should hire writers too. And you can, if you have the budget to hire writers, then great. That'll be fine. If you have the budget to do it, that'll save you some time. Christy did most of her writing for her site for, I can't remember, maybe like the first year, maybe it was the first 6 months. I did encourage her to hire some writers so that she started to build the skills to work with writers. She was already working with writers, by the way, and was good working with freelancers, but I encouraged her to get some people on board so that she would be able to accelerate when she was ready. And she had the budget too. But I don't think hiring writers or not hiring writers is the thing that's holding you back, Jeff. Usually you're going to spend more time and be a lot more thoughtful about the content that you're writing and publishing for your own site versus someone that you hire. And the thing is, Jeff, nowadays, the AI writers are so good. So the day that I'm recording this, I'm going to be doing a live stream later today using a new AI writer called Claude. And it's free, number one. It's very fast, and it's not as good as ChatGPT 4 as far as like reasoning and some of the other qualities, like problem solving. However, Claude is very good at writing. In fact, it's tested in air quotes better than ChatGPT for content creation. So in fact, I've found it to not be detectable by tools like originality.ai, which is interesting because ChatGPT seems to get busted every time I put content into Originality, but Claude seems to write in a more human-like way. So it's not detectable, at least so far, right? These tools get better, they improve over time, right? But the point is, you might be able to use an AI tool to get a lot more content done in a short amount of time. And the way I've been testing is to either write my own outline or ask ChatGPT to write an outline for me. And then I'll get Claude to write the actual content. And it's pretty damn good. It's pretty damn good overall, especially if you're using your own outline and maybe, for example, let's say I want to write a little story and I write the beats of the story that I want to have in there. And then I could just ask Claude to write the rest of it, and it knows what I want to put in. So we're not even relying on the input data from like the original data set for Claude. It's just writing on what I want it to write about. So anyway, Jeff, I think overall, I haven't given you a good answer. I just said, here's like 8 options for you. But overall, like you should look at your site and try to figure out what is wrong with it. So there are some thought exercises. Actually, I won't give it away now. If you want to hear more of these sort of shorter, like mailbag Q&A episodes, let me know. I may, it's pretty fast for me to record these usually. And they're pretty fun, especially if I have some coffee and caffeine, earlier in the day. I can record these, get them out, and I enjoy it. So if you want to know more about what I was about to say, which is like some thought exercises to help you figure out like where things may be going wrong, let me know. Leave a comment on YouTube and say, hey, I want to know this thought exercise that you're talking about, Doug, and I better write it down because I'm 100% going to fucking forget. So I'll write it down so I don't forget, but leave a comment or shoot me an email, feedback@Doug.Show. Thanks for checking it out. I think I can roll the outro music here. Yeah, that works. It's like I'm my own producer here. So thanks a lot for listening. You can, rate, subscribe, leave a review, all that kind of stuff. We'll catch you on the next episode.